Okay, so then we are ready now technically to start. The interpreters are in place. And I would like, without any further ado, to give the floor immediately to our host, the regional governor of Ionia and Nisia, Theodoros GALIATSATOS. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Corfu for this 13th CPMR Islands Commission Annual General Meeting. Welcome to the seat of the region of the Ionian Islands, and at the same time to an island that has long history in the European affairs. Because Corfu is home to the first governor of Greece, Ioannis Kapodistrias, a personality of international acknowledgement, a politician who laid the foundations for the European unity. Ioannis Kapodistrias, the first European enthusiast, participated in international fora and highlighted that Europe needs to be protected against violence and against the policies of grand powers. He insisted on political unity of European countries. A century later, the European policy of Kapodistrias was proved to be absolutely correct. Welcome to the island, which, thanks to its geostrategical position, played key role to big political events of Europe. In a unique way, our island became Roman, Byzantine, Venetian, French, British, and finally Greek. And it assimilated various elements, but it also kept its unique nature. Over the next few days, you will have the chance to discover the special characteristics that make the Ionian Islands unique, this unique combination of various cultural elements. Also, we have a rich tradition in music, in culture, and if you discover them, you will understand why our island is still a city where the West and the East meet, a city that assimilates contradictory elements in the best possible way without conflict. This conjecture is particularly critical. And why is that? Because there are important issues underway. For example, the negotiations for cohesion policies after 2020 and the problematic handling of the regional requests by the European Commission. A second very important issue is the risk of the emergence of the extreme right, and this will be further explored over the next 2 months because we have the European elections. This is why a lot of us have underlined the importance of citizen participation in the European election and citizen contribution in order to avoid the rise of the extreme right, because it might affect the cohesion policies and, of course, the insularity policies that are of particular interest to us. At this point, I would like to thank the leadership of CPMR and its executives, and particularly the Secretary General, Ms. Mariano, in their comments towards the European Union when it comes to budgeting and the new policies. So we have laid down the issues, we have brought them forward, but what is important is what will be the final achievement, what will be the conclusion. In these 2 days, I'm confident that we will have the opportunity to exchange information and opinions on circular economy, energy, biodiversity protection, island policy, and explore feasible proposals, best practices, and effective synergies in order to attract funding. Having said that, I would like to wish the best for this conference, and I wish you a nice stay in Corfu. Enjoy your time here. Thank you.
Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to give the floor in this framework, a framework that was very nicely put by Mr. GALIATSATOS. Now I'm going to give the floor to the President of CPMR. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, members of the CPMR. Of course, I will start by thanking everyone, Mr. GALIATSATOS and all those who were involved in the organization of the General Assembly. Thank you for you hosting this assembly. 1 year ago, we all started with the organization of this project. Today, this project has come to an end. It has become a reality. We truly appreciate the wonderful landscape, the scenery, and of course, the warmest welcome and the delicious gastronomy aspects of last night. As you already said, Chairman, this assembly happens in a highly critical time in light of the broader framework in which the European Union needs to make specific decisions. On the other hand, when it comes to the region, particularly for the insular regions in Europe, we need to look into the various policies and issues brought forward, because we need to see whether the islands are going to be considered in the future plans of the European Union with regards to public policy. I'm not going to repeat everything you mentioned before. You put everything on the right basis. I will be very brief in this first introduction, and I will say that yes, today Europe is in a crossroads. As to the European elections, well, in 2 months, more elections will come along our way. European elections constitute a very important moment, because right now we are faced with centrifugal powers, and we need to see what the elections results will bring about. I truly hope for a united Europe. This is the only way in order for Europe to remain strong with solidarity. I do hope that this will be the result of the European vote. Now, when it comes to our commitments and our action, there are still the issue to consider the specificities of insular regions. It's very important to consider this particular character when drawing and planning public policies. Well, besides, this is something that has been highlighted constantly in all our actions, reports, studies, in public policies of cohesion, transportation, training, research, policies that have to do with energy. Well, all those issues need to be at the heart of the CPMR's work. In that way, we will be able to convey our opinions to the European Commission and the national governments. I'm confident that the CPMR will be a valuable tool that will be very powerful, highly active. So once more, welcome with a new edition, the Saint Martin Island, represented by two ladies. Very well. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the Ionian Islands. I believe that now we can start directly with voting for president. As you know, the elections take place every year. We have received emails 2 months ago by all members, so you all know what's going on with the President and Bureau election procedure. And President SIMEONI announced his will to continue for another year, to continue with his term as President of the CPMR. So I want to ask you, are there any regions that would like to make any comment with regard to the candidacy of President SIMEONI? Very well, thank you very much. So I think that, okay, we have a new president. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, normally, this is not how it should happen. We should hold the elections, but anyway, thank you for your confidence and trust. Actually, you have been a highly effective president, so I believe that we can skip this procedure. Now, let's move on to the Bureau procedure. I would like to say that we have the Corsica region, and when it comes to the other vice president, Cyprus, okay, kindly confirm what you sent us last week. And we also have Ms. Haralabu Salidi. She's the representative of Cyprus. If there are no other comments on behalf of Ms. Savidi. Good morning. It's a great pleasure that we can participate in CPMR, in this commission. It's a first for us in this particular commission, and we will try to help you in the works, in your works. Thank you. Great, we are sure about it. Thank you so much. And now let's move on to Denmark. We confirm Mr. Bronsman. He's the representative of Denmark. He is with us today. Estonia. We are expecting the name of Estonia's representative. Our friend announced that there were elections, so we will wait for a name. So, we're looking forward to receiving the name of your representative. Greece, of course, from Greece. Of course, we have a regional governor, GALIATSATOS. Italy, we have Mr. Armand. in Sicily, Malta, Justine Caravana, Portugal, Miguel Albuquerque from the region of Madeiras. He is not here with us anyway. Now, when it comes to Spain, we have received information that some changes are in order. This year, we are honored to be joined by Canary Islands, with Mr. Espandia being the representative. Now, when it comes to Sweden, we have the honor and pleasure to host Jesper Kansen, who announced that he's available to be the vice president when it comes to the United Kingdom. Well, actually, that's the structure of the new political bureau for the new year. As you know, we need to elect the first vice president. I think I'm going to ask for the confirmation Mr. Justin Carlson. He's the first vice president of CPMR, and he's going to represent the entire CPMR and, of course, the region of Sweden, of Gotland. So, how effective is our bureau? We know that we are effective in our work, and now, with no further ado, I'd like to give the floor to our president again. He's going to talk about the future of the lobbying of CPMR. So, you have the floor. Well, look, I think that we have already discussed the important dates, the important meetings that are coming up for our commission. I believe that we now need to be as effective as we can be. That's the key word that has already been mentioned by Mr. GALIATSATOS as well. I believe that in the context of this particular endeavor, we managed to make a contribution towards the European construction. I believe that we have gone through some difficult times and periods, but in a spirit of unity, we have managed to move forward things and understand the significance of the European construction, particularly in light of the current social, economic and political circumstances. When it comes to the second aspect of our work, this has to do with maximum efficiency and effectiveness, always considering the fact that our roadmap, our map, lies in the heart of all our endeavors, and of course we want to promote islands. Apart from any other political discourse that sometimes is a little bit stiff and rigid, our ultimate goal, a goal that has not been achieved yet. I dare say that having the presence of all those members here today, even if Europe is listening to us in a spirit of diplomatic courtesy, they show an interest nonetheless. Anyway, the replies and responses that we have been receiving, to my point of view, are not up to the occasion. And why is that? Well, according to the latest words of Commissioner Cretu, it seems that our commissions are being left in the hands of member states. We have been referred there, if you prefer this term. Normally, this shouldn't be the case. This is not our perspective. Of course, there are many things that can be received by all member islands, given that we are characterized by insularity. Anyway, we're here discussing the new political framework, particularly the financial aspects and the budget of the European Union, and I believe that better consideration should be given to the role of the island. So, the those topics, of course, are of economic nature. We know that. Issues of EU-related issues, EU-related things and topics, but I know that every member works towards the same direction, the direction of maritime collaboration. However, this endeavor cannot be of purely economical nature. We need to institutionally restructure European Union in order for insularity of Europe to be considered seriously, and this is not happening to the right extent. Of course, this also has to do with marine transportation or air transportation. You will know that when it comes to insular regions, that's something that is at stake. That's a pending affair. So we need to reinforce transport networks. I'm talking about transportation by sea or through air. It's something that is being brought forward in every meeting. It has to do with all the islands. In short, we need to see how to approach this issue and see how we can connect insular areas better. Energy, let us not forget about it. Islands are pioneer regions with regards to energy transition, as to waste management, energy sufficiency. All those efforts are being made on the islands, and they lead the way compared to other European regions. Social cohesion now, that's another issue that needs to be addressed. For example, island population. You all understand that it has a declining tendency. However, island citizens stand for 20 million men and women. This population lives on islands, and they have equal rights as every other European citizen. Sometimes they need to have access to the same or even better living conditions. Of course, I'm not talking about privileged treatment. No, I'm talking about equal treatment of those 20 million men and women. We want them to have the same treatment with the other European citizens. So, that's a legal basis that needs to be considered. I speak about Article 174 of the EU Convention, of the EU Treaty. This gives us the tools in order to deal with the special conditions that exist in all the islands. I repeat, Article 174 of the European Union Treaty is an article that exists in theory but has never been implemented in practice as it should have. The European Commission listens to us. They listen to us in a courteous way. However, they have not proceeded to put in practical force Article 174 of the EU Treaty, which deals with insularity. The second argument that is brought forward is that insularity is a purely geographic criterion. Apart from this insular dimension, we know that our regions are characterized by specificities with regards to demographics, financial conditions, distances among the different islands. So this is our reality. You understand that sometimes we cannot afford missing this dimension. At the same time, I would like to say that we also have Sicily, Sardinia, Balearic Islands. Those people want to collaborate. And efforts are going to be made for those areas to be strengthened. So we know that diversity is an important asset of those areas. And this this should be a positive aspect for European Union and ourselves. So insularity is of the essence. Islands, of course, are not all faced with the same problems. However, they have specific goals, and depending on the conditions, all those things need to be considered seriously. It is through a series of objective criteria that we'll be able to set specific assessments and support criteria for those islands, always considering the specificities, the special conditions of those island complexes. So, and I would like to say that when we talk about the outermost regions, so we need to consider their conditions as well. We need to understand that there are insular regions, island complexes that are located even further, even remote compared to other islands, but they need to enjoy the same rights to assistance and support. The same applies to the European Union. That's why the European Union considers those outermost areas in their policy making. The same applies with all the islands that co-formulate the European structure. Well, we know that's a battle that we need to fight. We're not here in the framework of a protocol. We are here in order to solve problems with the Islands Commission. I know that you are here in order for us, the board, the presidency, the actions, will be able to hold over the next months actions that are warlike. Of course, I'm talking about a democratic war, but war nonetheless, a war that will determine our future. I don't want to be dramatic about it. However, I have to say that if we miss this train, if we miss the European elections train, then frankly, without being dramatic, the difficulties faced by Europe, the national difficulties due to the financial crisis, the inability of Europe that does not consider insularity to the right extent, will make our obligations, our lives, horrible or unsurmountable. We need to have a European Union that is close to its citizens. We need to speak in one voice, considering that we have 20 million residents on the islands. The term I have been entrusted with, the people who have put their faith in me, mean that I must do my best, and this term includes fight. Of course, we are Mediterranean people, and we are Europeans at the same time. We're not against Europe. We believe that our citizens enjoy specific privileges. One might say that conditions are different in the south, or the north, or east, or west of Europe. Okay, that's true. But I believe that our islands have a very peculiar character, special features, and sometimes disadvantages are there and will continue being there. So, today and tomorrow we are going to work on topics that lie at the heart of the European affairs that we care about. We're talking about growth, cohesion, digitization, circular economy, energy transition, training, research, transport. All those fields are fields where islands can pioneer in, always in light of the fact that we're going to undertake our responsibilities. We are willing to do so, and we expect from European institutional bodies to consider seriously this democratic request of ours. And I would like to conclude with this, your thoughts. Now we're going to listen to something different with regards to the historic overviews and see what has been achieved over the past years and what has not been achieved yet. Personally, I believe that we are at a crossroads. And when we're there, well, we need to make a choice and we need to choose the right path. I believe that together we can make the right choices. We do have the means to complete this task successfully. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now it's an honor to give the floor to the former Executive Secretary of the CPMR Island Commission. Thank you, President, for the warm welcome. In this room, I see familiar faces. I have known them from years, and I also see new faces. That's, of course, normal. Representatives change. However, I would like to explain why I have disappeared for 5 years. It's not because of political games. I was not trapped. I was not poisoned. Unfortunately, I had serious health issues, so I had to leave some obligations aside. Anyway, 5 years later, here I am. I'm not here to say goodbye. Don't rush into that. I would just like to talk about how we can make this dialogue fruitful, and I would like to talk a bit more about the lobbying means that we have and what we can do. I would like to paraphrase the phrase of Joseph Stalin on Vatican. He was told that the Vatican is very influencing, and he said how many troops they have. Okay, this is what I'm going to say. How big is our troop? So we need to know what is our influence, our leverage inside the European institutions. President SIMEONI talked about the need for lobbying. Article 174 is not compulsory. We cannot bring EU institutions before the European Court demanding to implement this article. This article is a way to implement policies in favor of islands only if the EU institutions want to do so. So if they want to do so, there are specific measures based on Article 174. However, it's not an antidote. It's not like the single market regulation. It's not something compulsory. You cannot go to the European Court for not respecting Article 174. So currently, we need to persuade EU institutions to implement the possibilities offered by Article 174. The Island Commission and the Economic and Social Commission have to put pressure. Already since 1970, we have been very active. Georges Perret, the founder of CPRM, played key role. But let's be honest. The Island Commission and the Economic and Social Commission are not that politically powerful. These organizations allow to express our opinion, to hold consultations, to ask questions and put forward requests. Those organizations, those commissions, cannot play a decisive role because they cannot put so much pressures. So, according to my personal and professional experience, I believe that the European Commission is a rather open structure. It has very often been criticized, but I think we have a relatively easy access to EU Commission employees. Indeed, the fact that we can meet them, we can talk to them, doesn't mean that they agree. There are various people, some of them are interested, some of them are supported, and of course, some of them are not supportive at all, and they don't care about insular policy, they don't care about the islands. So it's the human factor that plays a role here. The fact that X person works for X position plays a role. For example, Commissioner Barnier, who has also undertaken very sensitive positions, had been a commissioner until 2004. When we talked about the island problems, he stopped and he said no reason to go on. I was elected by the Savoy, which is a mountainous area, so we are facing the same problems as you. So there was no need to further explain what insularity is, what the island character is. We could talk about the essence. We could cut to the chase and raise specific issues. However, he was followed by a German commissioner who, due to her political past, she was a trade unionist in the industries, but she couldn't understand what we were talking about. She couldn't relate to it. She was persuaded that islands are for holidays, so how can there be any problems in a place where people go for holidays? So the human factor plays a key role. Of course, as you understand, we didn't have excellent results with this second commissioner. One needs to bear in mind that the Commission takes initiative on legislative initiatives, but there are also some fields in which they're not very active. For example, external trade, fishery, and fishing is of interest to the EU Commission. So I would like to urge you to approach the competition agencies. They are our allies. Sometimes they make our life difficult because they're not in favor of certain systems, but if we didn't have this agency for fair competition in the EU Commission, then the law of the jungle would prevail. And we would, of course, lose because we're not that powerful. So, as paradox as it may seem, the fair competition committees and agencies are our allies. The same applies to fishing commissions and committees. Of course, we need to present documented studies with evidence, and I would like to thank Nicolas Bruggs and his team for their excellent studies, for the well-documented research. I remember a few years back in an assembly between various insular regions and the Directeur General for competition, we talked about regional issues, and I did something which was very simple. There were already some proposals that had been submitted, and insular areas were at the same level as other areas, so there was no distinction made for islands. So I presented a proposal for the area of the Fosse at Paris, where there are skyscrapers, and then I demonstrated what happens on an island, what happens on a mountainous area in Corsica. I demonstrated 2 air photographs, and I said, can you take a look at these 2 places. They are completely different. We cannot treat them in the same way. So we use such tricks. Two photographs can be as effective as a detailed, documented, evidenced, sophisticated study. Now let's go to the European Parliament. We need to bear in mind how the European Parliament has a particular difficulty in many member states. The election of European MPs happens through a list. So in this case, we don't know whether the candidates come from insular areas. If we are lucky enough to have such candidates among the first positions of the list, they will be eligible. So we will have more EMPs from islands. But if the contrary happens, there might be the case where no representative from an insular area are elected. Of course, there are some exceptions. Malta, Cyprus are islands. Italy, where Sardinia and Sicily elect their own EMPs. But this is not the case for all member states. This creates rather arduous conditions, because these MPs that try to defend the island rights, that try to facilitate our lives, in fact, don't know much about them. It's not their constituency. What's more important is the relationship with their party. And I will give an example from Corsica. François Fosse did a great job in the European Parliament, and he was in the list for political reasons, but he found himself out of the list in the next elections, even though the job for the islands was exceptional. So one might work very hard but not receive the acknowledgement from their political party. Despite those difficulties, we were lucky enough to have various EMPs that supported us. I won't mention their names in order not to forget anybody. So many EMPs fought for the islands and for the insular policy and did an excellent job. However, please take into consideration the following: the difference between the first texts, the original text, and the final voted text. When it comes to legislative initiatives, they don't have immediate implementation. There might be exceptional initiatives on islands that completely replicate your proposals. However, when we reach the moment of the regulations voting, as it happened with the regional policies regulation, then things change, because political discipline, party discipline, national discipline comes into play. EMPs follow the line provided by their political party, by their national government, so it's very difficult to pass provisions that they, in fact, supported before, but they don't do in the moment of the voting. This is very annoying, but this is something that happens, and we need to live with that. Quite often we wonder why our two technical presentations do not attract the attention of certain EMPs. For example, in 2009, regarding the amendment that we had proposed the elimination of the elimination of discrimination against the islands when it comes to the invoices related to renewable energy sources. We managed to pass that despite the EU Commission. But we had the support of the European Parliament, and I talked to an EMP that contributed to that, and he said, look, this is too technical, but luckily enough, we had one or two EMPs that were aware of these very technical issues. So sometimes when we have a very specific, a very technical proposal, there will be some EMPs that will vote in favor because they know all the details. Now, when it comes to the European Council, we have to take into account the correlation and the balance of powers in the European Union. In the European Union, there are only 10 million insular residents. 2.8 from 2.8 to 3.2% of the EU citizens live on islands. So imagine if we were 100 people, 3 people should persuade the other 97 people that they are right. It's not an easy thing to do. So in some cases, in some countries, we are more powerful, thanks to demographics or thanks to institutional factors. For example, in Italy, about 11% of residents live on islands. There is Sicily and Sardinia. In Greece, that percentage is 13%. Malta and Cyprus are island member states. But if we go to Sweden or Denmark or the United Kingdom, which has very few Scottish islands, sparsely populated, then this power decreases. Of course, it is important to be somehow autonomous in certain issues in order to be able to negotiate with our own member states. Sometimes there isn't such a framework, while in other cases this is possible. The problem is that in the north we have very few island residents. Some islands have an independence or an autonomy regime. In the south, we have many more islands. And let's see the importance of the demographic factor. So let's talk about the outermost regions. For example, in Portugal, Madeira is autonomous not only when it comes to its internal issues, but also in relation to the Portugal state. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Portugal has a representative for these islands. The Canary Islands have 2 million people. It is an autonomous region, and this has been established under the constitution. The outermost regions of France, the so-called dom-tom, have about 2 million residents. So this is a political issue. When we have regional elections in France, let me assure you that all politicians prepare their suitcase and they embark on a tour on these outermost regions in order not to be forgotten by the constituents. Another aspect of outermost regions is, of course, the geostrategical aspect, their role in defense, diplomacy, the protection of maritime routes, the air corridors, for example. I would like to say that when there is a tension in the Near East, when there is a conflict, and when the US troops are about to intervene, the first ones to know are the Azores. because this is where US aircraft stop in order to get fuel. So all those regions have power to put pressure. So if we have this combination, if you have this combination in your insular complex, this is very important. Another important element is that islands are as powerful as their member states. Sometimes this is good, sometimes this is not that good. For example, in the negotiation for the European Structural and Investment Funds, Greece, a traditional ally, was in the midst of a very severe crisis, so they were not in a position to negotiate in favor of the islands. They were faced with a survival problem. Cyprus, the same. Malta was in an electoral period, and Italy was also faced with a political crisis as well. So the powerful states that could be of help in these negotiations were not present for reasons out of their control. They had other priorities to deal with. So another thing to be taken into account is again the human factor. If a state has a minister, a president, a political figure that comes from an island, this makes our life easier. At the end of the 90s in Spain, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was from Ibiza. Actually, he owns part of Ibiza thanks to a bank in which he's involved anyway. That person considered the island issues priority issues, and he put pressure through his position. And this is an opportunity. Another opportunity is that sometimes when an island area has the rotating presidency of the EU, then we can have the floor. We can present our arguments, and we can place our own issues in the priority agenda of the EU. So the rotating presidency can be a very helpful tool. So there are such opportunities in which a member state or a minister can be really, really helpful in putting forward our issues, but this is not always the case. Another inherent problem is that member states are selfish entities. They are there in order to defend their citizens or their constituents. So when a choice needs to be made, they made the choice in another ruthless way. For example, France has islands. Corsica, Bretagne Islands, small islands. In the Mediterranean, France also has mountainous areas, agricultural, non-privileged areas. So France, one would say that it should have been a fervent supporter of geographical cohesion. No, not at all. The Minister of Finance says that if we increase cohesion, we will also increase our contribution, our financial contribution to the EU, and this is not to our interest. So they're trying rather to cut back on cohesion policies, even though this will be rather beneficial for the French territories. Another example, the policy of small gifts. When negotiations begin for cohesion, at some point you will read in small letters that according to the international agreement there will be an extra credit to member state. These credits happen without any criteria. It is regardless of the unemployment rate, regardless of the insularity. There are extra small credits to member states. And these amount to 10 billion, 10% of the total EU budget. And why do we have these gifts? Because this is how negotiations get started. So at the end of the negotiations, regardless of any criteria, 10 billion is given. 60% of those amounts goes to islands. Spain received 1.7 billion. France 200 million. Portugal 200 million, and Malta 250 million. This is a political problem. But let's imagine that Corsica is now an autonomous state. You are the president of Corsica and you are in Brussels. So you have to negotiate a credit line. And the Commission says, Mr. Simeoni, your proposal won't go through because Germany is opposed, France is opposed, Sweden is opposed, but we understand that this would be very convenient for you because that would be very beneficial for you as an insular state. But following negotiations, we may manage to give you 200 million for the port of Bastia, for your airport. So what would you do as an elected representative? You have the choice to put on a political fight that you are not going to win in this imaginary scenario, or to accept this proposal and leave this table with a credit that will allow you to implement some projects. This is a choice that needs to be made very often. So member states are by default, by definition, selfish. This is realpolitik. It's not either bad or good. And the last European institutions to which I would like to refer is the European Court. I'm truly looking forward for islands to bring cases before the European Court. Cases against the European Commission or the European Parliament, in order to be able to get some compensation. Of course, we need to be based on the discretionary management discretionary treatment. When there is discretionary treatment among areas, based on insularity, for example, then we need to go to the European Court. So there should be a legal precedent at some point in order to encourage us to use the European Court more often. It's not easy, it costs, it will take 2 or 3 years for a case to be trialed. So in conclusion, I would like to say that I was not very lenient on you, but it is very important to put pressure. It is very important to lobby in favor of insular areas. There are windows of opportunities. And I don't mean that planets are in favor of us due to astrology elements. No, we need to identify specific opportunities. If we've had a commissioner from an island area, if we have a minister in our country from an island, then this is a window of opportunity. And the wealth of the island policy is its diversity. If there's something that's blocking us in Greece, we can turn to Sweden, or another colleague from Spain might intervene, etc., etc. That makes us more powerful, and we need to seize opportunities. These windows of opportunities are very small, are very short, because elections are coming, commissioners change, ministers change, representatives change. So sometimes this window of opportunity might be very short, but we need to be on the alert and quickly identify any opportunity and put pressure when we have the chance to do so, in order then to be able to lobby, in order to pass some legislation from the European Parliament. I would like also to say that you need to seek allies. There should be an alliance between islands and outermost regions. But we also need to find allies among mountainous regions and other regions that are sparsely populated, because the same problems apply to them as well. Therefore, the most important thing is not to start a fight, to embark on a war with deployed troops, but to create a guerrilla and act as guerrillas in order to strike when we find this window of opportunity. So networks of information, networks of lobbying and influence must be updated. And I would like to put forward a proposal here. I think that it's important to look at the insular regions I would like to say that it will be important to establish scholarships for trainees or students or graduates that want to work for the EU institutions. So 2, 3, 4 people from each island to receive a scholarship. For example, a postgraduate student could work for the EU Commission or the European Council in order to then start a career. Will that be effective? It will be a long-term effect. If we do it for 5, 10 years, then at the end, we will have a pool of islanders that will have been funded by the region, by their island, and they will find themselves working for the EU institutions. That is a lobby. 3 people per region for 10 years, this is 600 people. Even half of them, if half of them stays, then we have 300 people working for us, basically. This is an incredible pool of experience, of influence, and of contacts and networking. Thank you very much.
En remerciant le...
Thank you. I would like to thank the first speakers. I know that we're just about to adopt the final declaration. I believe that we managed to properly describe the context of our discussion. Like the President said, right now we're ready to battle a European war, yet a peaceful one. It is very important for islands to be able to talk, to speak up, and their voice to be heard. We know that there are various limitations on the islands. However, though we do have the regional spatial agenda that is currently being discussed in Europe. And given that we're talking about an urban and peri-urban agenda, we need to contribute by including our own elements. Let us not forget about insularity and specificities. Another important thing to consider is the fact that there are reports and studies in the European Union that deal with areas and regions that are not important, they're unimportant. How can we elect some small, popular governments in those areas? For example, in light of Brexit or the Trump government, which are the areas where constituents were able to achieve popular governments? Well, actually, those were the areas that were sometimes overlooked by politicians. We know that those people need to be treated in the same way with the rest of Europe. with the rest of the citizens who live in urban centers. So, like I said, we're talking about a peaceful war. And we need to consider the dialogue that has been developing around spatial policy. We need to be able to define the critical aspects. Elections are on the agenda. Let us not forget about it. And it will be important. It's already important. And the reality guru before talked about the different channels that give us room for intervention, always through our states and in combination of what we do here on the board, the Commission. We know that the Croatian presidency will be the closest thing to the island. It will start early 2020. So I think that that's a great opportunity in order to talk about insularity on an entirely different level. And we can be in contact with the competent ministers. Of course, we also have the European Parliament. That can be helpful. There are many European citizens and politicians who are very sympathetic towards the cause of insularity. So, this is a peaceful war. There are the final declarations that will be adopted shortly. And this will bring us to the White Book for the islands, our positions on the islands, and I believe that now it's the right time to bring the European institutions before their obligations. So just an introduction to the speakers. Now I'd like to give the floor to Giuseppe before proceeding with the adoption of the declaration. Like I said before, it's very important to have this consultation among us. Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to contribute to the discussion? Yes, I see some hands.
Merci, Giuseppe. Bonjour à tous. J'aimerais juste laisser...
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I would also like to share with you a few remarks on what the President mentioned before, and I would like to talk about the importance of the islands. Right now, we're at a very specific point. It's the right time to take action. If we don't, we won't be able to address issues in the future, and more difficult situations will come in our way. It's up to us to help our citizens, island citizens. Like Mr. HACHE said before, it's true that there's still a long way to go. Many things to be done, considering that the stakes are high. We need to take actions, for sure. Things are difficult, yet the window of opportunity is there, and we need to capitalize on that. Always, of course, in light of the upcoming elections in Europe. European Parliament elections have their own importance, significance. Anyway, I believe that we need to see how the President's strategy can be put in practice. Any other interventions, comments at this point? Yes, Bornholm, to begin with.
Image you used, the image you used of the letter from Stalin to the Vatican, because I see this final declaration a bit like the letter to the Vatican, and the issue you rose about the combat being a guerrilla war rather than a combat of force. I think that's very important to address for us as an action plan, that this is just a letter, but the actual force behind it is if we manage to set up a guerrilla war. So I'd like maybe for the panel to address a little bit, how are we going to make the change? Because for 10 years we haven't been able to enforce 174. How are we going to strengthen our lobby, work around it? And secondly, the specific, the financial aspect of the BNP being the only parameter that the financial part is distributed for the regions. How will we introduce geographical, demographic, other issues? How are we going to address that?
Posso?
Si. Ok, on va prendre une deuxième question et après. D'accord? Vas-y, Gianni.
One more question. You have the floor. Okay, so I would like to thank Jean-Didier for the highly interesting presentation he made about the past and the future. Well, I believe that we need to unite regional areas, or territories. Either we talk about continental areas, mountainous areas, not just the islands. Okay, we do know that numbers are important. Demographics, population that stays on the islands is rather limited most of the times. So, politically speaking, I believe that in order for us to be more powerful, research, report are needed. We need to increase the number of citizens who need this change. That's critical for the future. Second point, I believe that the remote character of our area is very important. Maybe we need more financial data, economic data, in order for us to formulate our proposals. We have 3,500 islands. Those are the administrative regions. If you add to that the mainland regions, and I'm talking about mountainous areas, so with an altitude of more than 800 meters, then we know that the pressure to be exerted will be more significant if we increase these numbers. And would you like to answer to this question? Yes, of course, I will. So, start by answering your question.
To draft a smaller document or a very key message that we will send to European Commission, European Parliament, etc. Regarding your second question about the roadmap, actually we daily work in order to implement our message. So we are again in contact with the European Commission. We have some working group or task force that, and you will see today we will launch a new task force on transport, for instance. So we will use all these tools, and we will also collaborate with the General Secretariat of the CPMR in order to implement all this message and also to collect information and provide very key political message vis-à-vis of the European Parliament and the European Commission. We launched a couple of years ago in Helsinki thematic roadmap, and we identified at least 5 or 6 thematic areas that are very important for us, for the Island Commission. And over these years, we are trying to develop a concrete initiative. So again, you will have an overview today and tomorrow about what we are doing, but above all, what we will do in the future. And this means project design, project implementation, lobbying activities, setting up strategic cooperation and collaboration with other European organizations like Greening the Islands, like HOTIE, etc., etc. So trust me when I say that we are working for you and we are doing our best in order to implement all this message. Please.
Can I also say on that one, because I think it's important in terms of how do we follow up what is written here. Now, the idea is that we have a very short window and we don't have a very comfortable environment, it's been said, because of the population, because how we're going to deal with all the geographies, etc. So the idea is eventually to try to address the European institutions through the legislative process. And you know that we've been doing this. There are amendments that they have gone to all regulations, not just to the cohesion regulation, also to the transport that we will discuss later, or all the other regulations that they are dealing with the issues of the islands. This has gone to the European Parliament, and lots of our amendments have been approved, and it's part of the proposal of the Parliament. You know, when the trialogues are taking place now in the institutions, our proposals are there, integrated. So that's already a big achievement as such towards the final decision, right? So now we need to continue politically lobbying for what we are asking for, to have a particular place, in a way, in the debates. And that's what I mentioned before. It will be good to find out these ears that are ready to listen to us. And that's why the Croatian presidency, beginning of 2020, could be a useful path for us. And that's where we want to work with them. We don't have, I mean, Finland will be right after Romania, and then you have Germans, which are not necessarily interested on the issues of insularity, because how many islands do they have? So maybe it's, maybe one, yeah, the minister says yes, well, there you go. So not a massive population kind of appeal. So that's where we can have the little small window of opportunity to see that our issues, and we have proposals that for these issues to be taken on board on the legislative front and on the budgetary front, with the specificity of how the indicators, etc. There are proposals there. Now, we need to find these ears that they would like to push forward. And these member states, insular member states, that could be of help. Greece would be one, Cyprus would be another, Malta will be another, and in the CPMR, we have very good relations with the Greek ministry, very good relations with ministries in Malta and in Cyprus. So we just have to use as much as possible this window of opportunity between now and Croatia, because in Germany and 2020 the thing will be over. So we do have, that's why the President said we are on a fight phase. We need to use all the possibilities that we can. But also you individually, you can do that. These issues can be pushed through your government. We give some ammunition for yourselves to be using to your government, some of them being not necessarily very happy to increase the budget or to give any particular attention to geographies within the member states. So.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions?
Are there any other questions?
Bonjour, donc je vais parler en français. Tout d'abord.
Good morning, I will speak in French. First of all, thank you for the invitation. We are not members of the islands. Our islands are in the regions of CPRM. All those proposals are satisfactory, and I would like to contribute to the discussion saying that there are many islands that are not in insular regions, but in regional entities. And quite often I can see that there are translated texts from the Commission in which there is reference to insular areas. So in these official documents there should be an appropriate wording, let's say, when we talk about geographical regions of islands, because there are issues there as well, pending issues that need to be tackled. Therefore, there are best practices that need to be implemented for these areas as well. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Martin O'Melode here from Ireland. And okay, so I would like to identify a couple of points that were made, and also I have a question then regarding 174. Obviously, in Ireland and indeed in Europe at the moment, a lot of the discussion is not around the issues of the day. Rather, we're completely taken up with Brexit and the fact that there are elections coming and what will happen post-Brexit. regarding the Croatian presidency, I think the timing of the Croatian presidency is very good because we will now be after the elections and into a new session, and people will have just settled down. So it is very good timing from the point of view of the islands. I have a particular friendship with some of the Croatian islands and some of the Croatian politicians, and I know with their new islands legislation, etc., that they do have a very good understanding of island issues, and that, of course, should be used by everybody to influence discussion at EU level. Obviously, in Ireland at the moment, we have a particular issue now, at the, being an island nation which also has offshore islands with a very small population, of course. And I would just point out, again, I'm very grateful to be here today and that I have the opportunity to say to you today, in the times that are in it, that, that the Irish islands are under severe pressure. All of the various elements of island challenges that were mentioned by the previous speakers and up at the top table also relate to Ireland, maybe more so than any of the other EU countries that have offshore populated islands. In particular, my last point that I would make is with regards to 174 and the fact that 174 is not compulsory for the member states. It will be probably of interest to you here today, and probably also surprising to you here today, to learn from me that Ireland, which is an island nation, albeit with a historical border up in the northeast, Ireland as an island nation does not actually have one single islands policy. What I mean by that is the government of Ireland does not have one single islands policy on transportation, on education, on social and health, not one single island policy. So any way whatsoever that obviously that the Islands Commission and any of the other member states or any of the other island regions or groups can help us to get the message across to the Irish state, to the Irish government, that they need to recognise, A, that there is a big problem with the islands and the islands are under severe pressure, and B, that it's unusual that we are an island nation up on the very periphery, right out in the Atlantic, on the very edge of Europe, and that yet, as such a nation, that we don't have one single island policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you too for your comment. We will take stock of them. Ok. Maintenant, si vous êtes d'accord, je clôturerai là les débats parce que nous avons.
Now, if you all agree, I would like to end the debate and go to the adoption of the final declaration. You all know the procedure, but I would like you to take the trouble and take a look at these 10 pages. A kind reminder, only the members of the Bureau of the Commission can vote. So please take the handouts that have been given to you and follow me in this exercise. And of course, do not hesitate to ask questions if you have certain doubts or comments. So let's begin the reading of this document. And we will start with the introduction. There is a proposal for amendment proposed by Sicily in the first paragraph. The English version of the document, this is a minor amendment that concerns mainly the French version of the document. There is a change in the French version when it comes to the terminology that's being used. It is a very simple amendment, so I would read the proposal of Sicily. It concerns the French version wording. So we now talk about the clear and at times violent populist trend in public politics. So that's the proposal by Sicily. Are there any comments on this amendment? Is there anyone voting against? Thank you. Anyone abstaining? So we adopt this amendment unanimously. Second amendment. Third paragraph. Again, this amendment has been proposed by Sicily, so I will read. On this last point, the CPMR Islands Commission recalls that island regions suffer from severe and permanent natural and demographic handicaps, which have led to structural disadvantage and a significant gap in the development, and made their social and economic systems less competitive and more vulnerable in times of global crisis. So the addition here is the phrase have led to